Won't you open that door, welcome into my life, please, please.
Hi, I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy, and this is a presentation about grievance and complaint investigations. Now, in the workplace, you will encounter grievance investigations. You have a process, policy or procedure at your workplace in relation to this, or the workplace where you're consulting as an investigator will have a process, policy or procedure about grievances. Staff are told about them at induction, and if they have a grievance, they can put that grievance in. There is no problem today in 2018 moving forward where people have the right to express a grievance. It is encouraged, so the employer is aware of what's going on in the workplace, and any person at any time can express a grievance in the appropriate format for that workplace, which is in the process, policy or procedure. Grievance investigations are highly emotional investigations. A staff member may come to the employer and they're mad, they're upset, it's unfair, it's a violation of policy, procedure, legislation, it's not right. What do you do next? The investigator, that's you, you're engaged. Some problems are obvious grievances, but most of the time you'll need to know more before taking action. Jumping to conclusions based on false, faulty or inadequate information will only cause further problems and undermine your credibility and leave you open to criticism or liability. You must firstly assess the complaint or the allegation, the nature of the issue. Is it to do with organisational policy procedure or the conduct of an individual? Has the grievance procedure been followed? Can early intervention resolve the problem? Now that's the best case scenario. Someone comes to the employer with a grievance and says, this has happened, it's unfair, I want redress. Then the employer takes action in relation to it and nips it early and stops the behaviour that's caused it from happening. Then there is no longer a problem. Now that's not always easy to do, but before someone goes out on a very expensive psychological injury claim as a result of the grievance, which could have been dealt with 6 months ago and wasn't, then a timely address of the matter is required. So can early intervention resolve it? You should be able to provide advice and support where appropriate. Consider the duty of care responsibilities that you have, and what are the statutory requirements, for example, in the whistleblower legislation. So how long have you got since that grievance has been made aware to have it investigated and looked at? Investigate first. Remember, a staff member who is upset, angry or frustrated may not always give you an accurate picture of what happened. It's a highly emotional situation. They've got to come to work and be in there and be bullied or whatever is happening, and they've expressed a grievance about it. They want that bullying to stop. It's up to you to investigate, look at the facts, and then decide on a strategy for dealing with the problem. It is outcome focused or evidence focused, a target investigation to remedy an issue or a comprehensive collection of all evidence. So, what we're looking at here is facts, not emotion. Get emotion out of it. There is no emotion to be accepted. We're looking at cold, hard facts. So you, the investigator, can assess the situation and make a finding in relation to it. Be thorough. Interview everyone connected to the problem in the same manner. Other workers, witnesses, supervisors and managers. If they're connected with the problem, they will have information that they can provide in relation to it. Never, ever depend on a single version of what happened. Remember, interviews are only one way of obtaining facts. Look for other supporting evidence. There may be documents such as emails or alerts, training that was missed by one person or another. For example, if someone from a different culture or with less education is put into a role where they have to interact with people that may be beyond their understanding. Misunderstanding is not a crime. So someone puts in a grievance about it and we find that there's a knowledge, skill, attitude or training gap in relation to it, then that can be addressed very quickly. That person can receive the knowledge, skill, training or attitude gap rectification nicely and supportively, and then the matter shouldn't happen again. So we're looking for facts, witness statements that say what happened, and supporting evidence, documentation, email, CCTV, those sorts of things. The best tips for obtaining information: make sure you're relaxed and take your time. There's no use investigating a grievance when everybody's finished work for the day and it's 8 o'clock at night. You're going to be tired, and so are the other people. They're going to be more emotional being tired. Do it when you're alert, when you're rested and relaxed. Encourage a staff member to get it all out, both facts and feelings. Now here, you are getting the person to present their worldview of what happened to them and has led them to expressing the grievance. So, get the person to tell you about it, describe it to you, explain it to you. Ask questions such as who, what, when, where, why. Every question that you ask and every response that you receive will then lead to further questions. You said this is how it happened. Can you explain to me how that evolved? Just be polite about it. It's not an interrogation. You're not an interrogator. You're not an advocate. You're a person that's clarifying, listening to their worldview of what happened. Avoid making judgments during the interview. Gather all the facts first. They might be describing someone else and their bad behaviour. You don't want to go judging that person. You might go and interview another 7 people and they have a different story to tell. Avoid making promises about what actions you will take. Never ever do that. You're just an information gatherer documenting the circumstances of what happened. If you don't know, don't guess. Advise the witness that they will be informed later, and if you advise them of that, make sure it's done. You do it personally. Important considerations. Is it criminal or unlawful behaviour? Consider the appropriate burden of proof. Now, the burden of proof in a criminal matter beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high jump bar to get over. So, respond seriously, impartially and promptly. Natural justice and procedural fairness must be taken into account. Now, this means that both people involved in it, the person who's aggrieved and the person who's either the bully or sexual harasser or whatever, they have the right to be heard. They have the right to be listened to. They have the right to give their explanation of what happened. And they have the right for the deciding authority to do it impartially. Seek a response to the allegations from the respondent. Now, when you speak to the person who made the grievance and the person who's the respondent in it, so you've got the complainant, made the grievance, the respondent, the person who was undertaking the alleged bad behaviour, you give them a record of interview. At that record of interview, you explain to them their rights, you explain to them that they can leave any time, you explain to them they do not have to answer any questions, and you get them to confirm that they understand. They can have a support person, they can have a fact sheet provided by the organisation that explains the grievance procedure. You give them all that, explain that at the beginning, and if they have any objections to participating in the interview. If they do have objections, answer their questions, and if you can't answer their questions or their objections, stop the interview and they will be invited to make a written submission in relation to it according to process, policy and procedure. But most people will proceed, and with that record of interview, you ask a single question, they give you a single answer. What is your job? I am the administrator in the accounts department. How long have you worked there? I've worked here for 11 years. So single question, single answer, you go right through those. Keep accurate notes and records. You may record the record of interview with the complainant and the respondent. Now, the good thing about this, recording it, is if you have a recording and you give them a DVD copy of that recording, they won't listen to it, they never do. But they've got it in case they have to. Now, if you give them a written account of it, When a week later, when you take that back to them in the workplace, that's just going to re-arc the situation again. So basically, the record of the interview makes the person satisfied at that time. They've got a copy of what they wanted without re-arcing all the emotions a week later. Objectivity. The respondent should not have supervisory authority over the person who conducts the investigation. The respondent should not have any direct or indirect control over the investigation. Consider having the investigation conducted by someone outside and independent. And usually if you're watching this, you're either going to be an internal investigator or you're going to be an independent consultant conducting this on behalf of the workplace. Confidentiality is paramount. When dealing with complaints and grievances, it is imperative that strict confidentiality be maintained throughout the investigation. The rights and responsibilities of all parties involved must be protected. Matters of disclosure may be controlled by policy, process or legislation. Be very careful what documents you carry with you, what documents you email to people, what correspondence you have. Be very careful about that. You only really should be interacting with the person who instructed you to undertake the investigation. That's not the complainant and not the respondent. If there's a conflict of interest involved in the investigation, you should disqualify themselves immediately. If there is, or a potential conflict of interest, get that person out of it. The investigator must be impartial. Similar care must be exercised when dealing with witnesses whose involvement may cause a conflict of interest. So, be aware of that. If you're involved in it yourself, take yourself out of it, excuse yourself from the investigation. It's going to save a whole lot of trouble down the track. Victimisation. It is not uncommon for instances of victimisation to occur to the complainant. Such instances can be disciplinary matters or misconduct or serious misconduct or criminal offences. Any reports of victimisation should be regarded seriously and investigated also. And they should be investigated as a separate matter. Now, I once had to investigate a matter where a young lady was ostracised by her workplace because the most popular person in that workplace was committing criminal fraud in relation to selling something he had no right to. And as an office administrator in the accounts department, she's the person that found the anomalies and reported them to her manager, who ignored them and told her to ignore them. And the matter went on and kept on going. So the complainant took it to a higher authority who found out about it, got the police involved and had the gentleman who was committing fraud charged and jailed. Now, the complainant was ostracised by her fellow workers in the workplace over that, which that's not good behaviour for any workplace, and that's not a healthy workplace. That is a toxic one. So be aware of people being victimised in the process of your investigation. There are malicious or frivolous allegations. Be aware that this may occur. Seek to obtain evidence to prove or refute. Such instances can be disciplinary matters or misconduct or serious misconduct. Now, there are people that will make threats against other people in relation to promotions or pay rises or transfers and things like that. And they will do it openly. It's very competitive in some workplaces. So look out for any malicious or frivolous or vexatious allegations. Reasonable steps by the workplace. In negligence claims lodged by employees in respect to workers' compensation, discrimination, harassment matters, in respect to employer liability, which can be vicarious liability. That means the employer didn't even know about it, but because they're an employer, they should have known about it. The court looks at whether the employer has taken reasonable steps to prevent or deal with the cause of the problem. One such step is management actions, once it becomes aware of the complaint. So the grievance comes in, that's the system, then the management takes action in relation to it. Reasonable steps must be proven. When a grievance is reported, take the complaint seriously. Did the workplace take it seriously? Investigate promptly, fairly and appropriately. Be sensitive, private and impartial. Ensure that the problem has ceased and is dealt with appropriately. For example, discipline. Initiate means, policy, procedure, training, supervision to reduce the likelihood of the problem occurring again. That's where the investigator, during the process of her or his investigation, identifies a knowledge, skill or attitude gap that can be corrected. The employer's biggest legal mistakes are not taking a low-level complaint seriously before it escalates to a high one because the behaviour continues, not planning an investigation methodically or at all, not gathering the facts properly or weighing them up adequately, not keeping adequate records, notes, to show that they have acted appropriately. The vast majority of courts have decided that the employer is liable when they actually knew of the problem, could have learned about the problem, taken reasonable steps, failed to make immediate and appropriate steps. Now, this is one of the big issues in the workplace, and it applies to all government and corporate workplaces. There are 2% of problematic people working in the workforce who push every boundary. Those people, they go to their lunch break 15 minutes early, come back half an hour late. At the end of the day, they knock off at 4:30 instead of 4:45. In the morning, they arrive at work at 9:15 instead of 8:45. Whatever, they push boundaries. And if they get away with it, it just grows and grows and grows. And other people in the workplace have to take over their duties and responsibilities, and the people in the workplace are carrying that slack person who's pushing the boundaries and not working. Now, if a manager allows this to happen, that manager who doesn't enforce a boundary, this is where you're going to discover the most of the problems in relation to this kind of investigation. There is a manager who doesn't enforce a boundary. He or she is just a nice person and too scared to sit a person down and give them a hard talk about their work, their punctuality, their production, that sort of thing, and explain to them why they should be arriving on time and not leaving early and following what everybody else does and doing their work. They're too scared to do that. And the person that's pushing the boundaries, they keep pushing the boundaries, and it goes on and on and on. So when those two collide, the manager who doesn't enforce a boundary with the worker that does not adhere to boundaries and pushes them, then that's where these kind of grievances will get out of hand in the workplace. Look for that as the investigator. So that, combined with knowledge, skill, training or attitude gap, is a powerful clue to what might be happening in the workplace. Grievances must be handled fairly. Was the investigation fair? If you interviewed 3 people in relation to the complainant that supported the complainant's case, and you interviewed 17 people in relation to the respondent that supported the respondent's case, is that fair? No, it's not. Was all the relevant evidence taken into account? The relevant evidence, the facts, not the emotions, not what someone thought or what someone said or what someone imagined. What factually happened, was that taken into account? Was the outcome consistent? And did the action taken as a result of all this by the employer reflect the seriousness? Now, sometimes the reflection of the seriousness means 2 people just can't get on together. They don't, and that happens. You have people you don't get on with when you don't get your own way and you don't get on with them, right? And they have people they don't get on with, and you just might be 2 people that don't get on. Well, one of you can work over in the west side of the building, the other one can go and work in the east side of the building, concentrate on your work and get on with it. The employer is there to say to both the respondent and the complainant, we are the tax office. We are here to tax people. We want you to spend your productivity during the day enforcing the tax legislation and taxing people. We don't want you arguing with each other. So from now on, you are going to work over in the left side of the building. You're going to go and work over in the right side of the building. You don't have to work with each other. Therefore, get on and get on with your work. That is one way that they will address that. Is that outcome okay? You can review it down the track and see. You may not be able to manage either one of those people out of the organisation due to their behaviour to stop it. So you have to have a collaborative piece, and sometimes that is a solution that works. You will be surprised what people will hold on to and argue about with grievance investigations. They can be so minor, but to that person and their worldview, they're a major thing that upsets them mentally about coming to work each day. Grievance investigations are really good investigations. There are organisations around Australia who are investigation agencies. That's all they do. That's how prolific this type of investigation is. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy.